In the isolated tranquility of Cedar Ridge, a tiny mountain town cloaked in towering pines, Dr. Marcus Hale had finally found his peace. A former scientist and engineer, Marcus had stepped away from his former life, disillusioned by failed experiments and the relentless demands of his field. But one quiet evening, as he sat by the flickering warmth of his fireplace, a piercing light tore through the calm, blazing across the night sky before disappearing into the forest with a thunderous crash. Marcus felt a surge of urgency and unease he hadn't known in years. Grabbing his old field kit and flashlight, he ventured out, the anticipation thudding in his chest. As he reached the impact site, his life took a turn he'd never imagined. The glow of embers smoldered in the air, and a faint metallic scent mixed with the familiar scent of pine as Marcus neared the crash site. He squinted, barely able to make out a sleek, metallic craft lodged between fractured trees. It was unlike anything he'd seen on Earth, smooth, seamless edges with symbols etched into its hull that pulsed with a soft, otherworldly light. With his heart pounding, Marcus edged closer, his breath visible in the chilly night air. As he rounded the craft's side, he froze, caught by the sight before him. A figure lay sprawled a few feet from the craft, its form partly concealed by the shadows. Cautiously, he approached, raising his flashlight to reveal a slender humanoid figure, a woman, or at least something close to it. Her skin was a shimmering shade of silver, contrasting with patches of deep azure. She was injured, her breathing shallow, and a faint glow pulsed from her abdomen. What are you?" Marcus whispered to himself, fighting the disbelief that clouded his mind. As he leaned closer, he noticed the gentle curve of her abdomen. The realization hit him hard. She was pregnant. His hands hovered uncertainly, torn between fear and an overwhelming need to help. He placed his fingers gently on her neck, feeling the weak but steady pulse. "Hang on," he murmured, his voice a promise he couldn't explain. Swiftly, he scooped her fragile form into his arms, surprised by how light she was, and started back toward his cabin. The journey back was a blur of tension and focus. Marcus felt a wave of responsibility settle over him, an instinct that outweighed his questions and fear. By the time he reached his cabin, his resolve had hardened. He carefully placed her on his worn-out couch, draping a blanket over her, then grabbed his emergency supplies. As he cleaned and dressed her wounds, she stirred, her eyes slowly opening. They glowed a soft, pale lavender, locking onto his with a mixture of fear and relief. She moved her lips, attempting to speak, but her voice came out as faint, unfamiliar sounds. He held her hand gently, reassuringly. "It's okay," he said. "I'll help you. You're safe here." Her hand trembled, and with great effort, she managed to speak a single word in a language that sounded both melodic and strange to his ears. But there was something about her expression, gratitude, and perhaps a flicker of hope. She closed her eyes again, exhausted. Hours passed as Marcus watched over her, occasionally adjusting her bandages. He felt a growing sense of protectiveness, a fierce urge to keep her safe from whatever dangers had forced her to crash on his planet. As dawn broke, she stirred once more, her hand resting protectively over her abdomen. Marcus noticed, for the first time, a series of faint, rhythmic lights emanating from her belly, 3 distinct pulses, perfectly synchronized. His chest tightened with the realization. "Triplets," he whispered to himself, astonished. Her eyes opened again, and this time she spoke clearly, her voice soft yet filled with determination. "Help me protect them," she managed, her words accented but understandable, her gaze pleading. "They're all I have left." Marcus nodded, sensing the weight of her words. He didn't know who, or what, she was, but in that moment, he made a decision. Whatever it took, he would protect her and her unborn children. The following morning, Marcus awoke to the sound of faint, rhythmic beeps emanating from the corner of his cabin. He bolted upright, his eyes adjusting to the dim light streaming through the window. The alien woman lay on the couch, her breathing steadier but still shallow. Beside her, a small metallic device from her suit blinked in sync with the gentle glow coming from her abdomen. He watched, entranced by the mysterious pattern. A signal, a message, or maybe a warning. Taking a deep breath, Marcus approached her, hoping she was well enough to communicate. As he neared, her eyes opened, focusing on him with a clarity he hadn't seen the night before. The color had shifted slightly, now a soft aquamarine, and her expression held a calm, almost regal determination. "You save me," she murmured, her words halting but audible. Each syllable was laced with an unfamiliar accent, yet unmistakably genuine. Marcus felt a flush of warmth and responsibility wash over him. "I did what I could," he replied. "You're safe now." "But who? Who are you? And where did you come from?" She winced as she attempted to sit up, one hand instinctively moving to her belly. He helped her into a more comfortable position, his questions burning unspoken on his lips. She looked down at her abdomen, her expression softening. "My name is Lyra," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am from a place far beyond the reach of your people's technology. My home, it is not safe anymore." Her voice trailed off, her eyes flickering with a mix of sadness and fear. "There are those who want my children." Marcus frowned, the weight of her words sinking in. "Why? What makes them so special?" Lyra hesitated, her hand brushing over her belly as though to reassure herself of their presence. "My people, we are able to harness a rare energy, one that binds the universe. My children, they are the first of their kind, able to channel this energy in ways our kind has only dreamed of." She looked away, her gaze distant. That power could be dangerous in the wrong hands. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. He couldn't imagine anyone wanting to harm children, let alone those still in the womb. But the gravity of the situation weighed on him, pressing against his usual sense of rationality. "Who's after you?" he asked, his voice low. "A faction from my world," Lyra replied, her voice trembling slightly. "They seek control above all else. If they capture my children, they will raise them to be weapons, tools for their own ambitions. They won't let anything stand in their way." Her eyes darkened, and Marcus could sense the depth of her fear. He clenched his fists, the fire of determination sparking within him. He didn't know what he could do against a force so powerful, but he couldn't abandon her or her children. They had chosen his small cabin as their sanctuary, and that was enough for him. "Then we won't let them find you," he said firmly, surprising even himself with the resolve in his voice. "I'll help you protect them, whatever it takes." Lyra's eyes softened, and she placed her hand on his. A gesture that, though foreign, conveyed profound gratitude. "Thank you, Marcus. I had almost lost hope." As they sat in the quiet of the cabin, Lyra shared more about her world, a place of breathtaking beauty and harmony disrupted by the same forces that haunted her now. Marcus listened, his heart aching for her loss, but also swelling with admiration for her strength. She had risked everything to protect her children, and now he was determined to do the same. Their moment of peace was short-lived. A sudden low hum filled the cabin, growing louder with each passing second. Lyra's eyes widened, and Marcus recognized the fear in her gaze. "They're here," she whispered, her voice tinged with terror. "They've tracked us." Marcus's mind raced, his thoughts filled with images of the intruders outside, shadowy figures threatening to rip away the small sanctuary they had found. He tightened his grip on her hand, his resolve hardening further. There was no going back now. He would stand with her and her children, whatever the cost. Rising swiftly, he grabbed an old rifle from the closet, a relic from his grandfather's time, but the best weapon he had, and peered through the narrow cabin window. Outside, the forest lay silent, but a strange, pulsing light danced through the trees, moving closer with each passing second. Turning back to Lyra, he whispered, "Stay inside. I'll see what we're dealing with." With a final glance, he slipped out the door, stepping into the chilly morning air. The forest seemed to hold its breath, shadows deepening as the foreign light approached. Marcus took a steadying breath, his grip on the rifle firm. In that moment, he knew he would protect Lyra and her children with everything he had, no matter the odds. Marcus crouched low, his senses alert as he moved through the shadowed forest. The eerie, pulsing light continued its rhythmic approach, casting odd shadows against the trees. He had no idea what to expect. A scout, a full-blown search party, or something far worse. But he knew one thing. He had to protect Lyra and her unborn children. The hum grew louder, vibrating in his chest, as if the very air was electrified by the presence of whatever was coming. Suddenly, a dark figure emerged between the trees, moving with a fluid grace that Marcus had never seen in a human before. The being was tall, with elongated limbs and a dark, glossy exoskeleton that seemed to absorb the light around it. It carried a device that emitted the pulsating glow, and every few seconds, the creature would raise it, scanning the area with precise, mechanical movements. Marcus held his breath, gripping the rifle tightly. He knew that his grandfather's old weapon likely wouldn't do much against this kind of technology, but it was better than nothing. He watched as the creature advanced, scanning the ground as though it could smell the faint traces of Lyra's escape. His stomach twisted at the thought of her being taken away, her children used as tools for the power-hungry creatures she had described. Taking a deep breath, he steadied himself and slowly aimed. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. With a swift pull of the trigger, the rifle cracked, echoing through the silent forest. The bullet struck the creature in the shoulder, and it let out a chilling, high-pitched screech that reverberated through the trees. The alien staggered back, its dark gaze turning sharply toward him. For a brief moment, Marcus locked eyes with it, and an unnatural fear gripped him. This being, whatever it was, exuded an aura of cold, unfeeling malevolence. But he pushed down his fear, aiming again, ready to fire. Before he could pull the trigger, the alien moved with lightning speed, its long limbs propelling it across the forest floor in a blur. Marcus barely had time to react as it closed the distance, swiping a clawed hand at him. He stumbled back, feeling the rush of air as its claws missed him by mere inches. Regaining his balance, he fired again, this time hitting its leg. The creature shrieked and faltered, its body glitching with strange, rapid movements as if struggling to process the pain. But to Marcus's horror, it seemed to recalibrate, steadying itself with a menacing hiss. Realizing he needed a new plan, Marcus turned and dashed back toward the cabin. His heart pounded as he ran, branches tearing at his jacket, roots threatening to trip him. He could hear the creature's distorted, mechanical steps behind him, relentless and unyielding. As he burst through the door, he bolted it shut, quickly dragging a heavy chest in front of it. Lyra was sitting up, her eyes wide with fear. She could sense the tension in the air, the threat that loomed just outside. "They found us," Marcus panted, leaning against the door to catch his breath. "We need to think of something fast." Lyra's face was pale, her hand protectively covering her abdomen. "There is a way," she said, her voice trembling. "But it will require my energy, and I am weak." Marcus moved to her side, gripping her hand reassuringly. "Tell me. Whatever it takes, I'll help you." She nodded, her eyes closing as she gathered her strength. "In my world, we can create a barrier, a protective shield that can repel threats. But I can't do it alone. I need a link, a source of energy to stabilize the barrier." She looked at him, her gaze fierce yet vulnerable. "You must connect with me, Marcus. Through touch, I can use your life force as an anchor." He didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." Lyra took a deep breath, placing one hand on his chest. A warm sensation spread from her touch, radiating through his body, grounding him. He felt a tingling energy build between them, something both foreign and familiar, as if their very souls were connecting. As the connection deepened, a shimmering light began to form around the cabin. pulsating in sync with their combined heartbeats. Outside, the creature drew closer, its strange device emitting frantic beats as it sensed the energy field forming. With an unearthly scream, it lunged at the cabin, but as it made contact with the barrier, it was thrown back, repelled by a force it couldn't penetrate. The creature slammed into the ground, disoriented and screeching in frustration. The barrier held, creating a safe haven for them within the confines of the cabin. "It's working," Marcus whispered, awe filling his voice. But Lyra's face contorted with strain, sweat beading on her brow as she struggled to maintain the connection. "I can't hold it much longer," she gasped, her voice weakening. "Stay with me," Marcus urged, willing every ounce of his energy into the link between them. "We're almost through this." Outside, the creature rose once more, its gaze fixed on them, relentless in its pursuit. But as it attempted to breach the barrier again, it suddenly stilled, as if receiving a command from afar. Its gaze lingered on them one final time before it backed away, retreating into the darkness of the forest. Marcus felt the tension ease as the creature vanished, its threat temporarily withdrawn. Lyra collapsed against him, her breathing ragged. He held her steady, his heart pounding with relief and the weight of the ordeal they had just endured. "You saved us," he murmured, his voice filled with gratitude. Lyra shook her head weakly. "We saved each other." For a moment, they sat together in silence, the warm light of dawn filtering through the windows, casting soft, golden rays over them. The immediate threat was gone, but Marcus knew they couldn't stay here forever. The faction hunting Lyra and her children was persistent, and they wouldn't stop until they had her back. "We need a plan," he said softly, looking out into the forest, where shadows still loomed. Lyra nodded, her strength slowly returning. "There is one place they will not follow," she said, her gaze distant, "but it will be a dangerous journey." With a deep breath, Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of purpose settle within him. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. He was in this fight for the long haul, for Lyra and her unborn children. As the morning light grew stronger, Marcus and Lyra sat together in the quiet cabin, both absorbing the gravity of their situation. The alien being had retreated for now, but the respite was temporary. Lyra's mention of a safe haven, one place where the faction wouldn't dare follow, sparked a glimmer of hope in Marcus. But he knew the journey wouldn't be simple. "Tell me about this place," Marcus urged, his tone steady but laced with urgency. "Where can we go that they won't find us?" Lyra took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the edges of her abdomen protectively. "There is a region on my world," she began, her voice soft but resolute, "where an ancient energy field disrupts all technology, even the most advanced. It's known as the Silent Veil. Those who hunt me wouldn't risk entering it. The field renders them vulnerable, just as it does us." Marcus listened intently, his mind working quickly to consider the possibilities. "But we're not on your world," he pointed out, doubt creeping into his voice. "How do we get there from Earth?" Lyra looked down, her expression shadowed by both fear and determination. "My ship can still function on a basic level," she explained. "It was damaged in the crash, but if we can repair it enough for a single jump, we could reach a portal point hidden beyond Earth's atmosphere. From there, I could guide us to the Veil." Marcus nodded, his resolve hardening. They had only a slim chance, but he wasn't about to give up. He was too invested now, and he couldn't turn his back on her and the innocent lives she carried. "What do we need to get your ship working again?" he asked, already mentally cataloging the supplies he had. "The energy core is intact, but some of the conduits are damaged," Lyra explained. "We need materials to reroute power. Any conductive metals you can find will help. And..." She hesitated, her gaze meeting his with an intensity that made his heart quicken. "There's one last component, a stabilizer crystal. It's rare, even on my world. But if there's any place on Earth where such a crystal might be found, it would be within a scientific research center." Marcus furrowed his brow, thinking through the logistics. There's a facility about 20 miles from here. It's been mostly shut down, but they still keep some equipment stored there. If we're lucky, maybe we'll find what we need. Lyra's face softened with gratitude, and a faint smile touched her lips. Thank you, Marcus. You have no idea what this means to me, to us. Marcus simply nodded, a silent promise of his commitment. Get some rest, he said gently. I'll gather what we need and come back for you. Before she could protest, he was already preparing. Grabbing a small toolkit, his flashlight, and an emergency radio, Marcus mentally mapped out the route to the abandoned research center. The sooner he left, the faster he could return. He glanced back at Lyra before he stepped outside. She was lying back, her hand resting on her belly, her expression one of quiet hope mingled with apprehension. With a final nod of reassurance, he ventured into the forest, the dawn light casting long shadows through the trees. The research center loomed ahead, a cold, concrete relic of Earth's technological ambitions. The building had been abandoned for years, yet Marcus remembered hearing rumors about the rare minerals stored there, remnants of experiments designed to simulate the harshest conditions in space. Navigating through the rusted gates and into the echoing halls, Marcus felt a chill creep up his spine. The building had an eerie, lifeless stillness, as if it hadn't seen visitors in years. But he pushed down the unease, focusing instead on the task at hand. As he entered one of the storage rooms, he searched the shelves meticulously. His flashlight revealed various metals, spare parts, and a few mineral samples stored in labeled boxes. Just as he began to lose hope, he spotted a small, dusty case tucked in a corner, marked with a faded label in scientific shorthand. Opening it, his breath caught. Inside, encased in a small protective lining, lay a crystal that shimmered faintly with an inner light. It wasn't exactly like the ones Lyra described, but it had the same strange glow she'd mentioned. It was their best hope. With the crystal and materials packed, he retraced his steps back through the silent corridors. Just as he approached the exit, a low hum filled the air, and the faint sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He pressed himself against the wall, listening intently. The sound grew closer, heavy, and purposeful. Peering cautiously around the corner, he saw the unmistakable silhouette of one of the alien beings, a scout, scanning the area with the same device the one before had used. A surge of adrenaline shot through him. They were tracking him, likely alerted by his encounter with the previous alien. Holding his breath, he waited, his mind racing with possible escape routes. He knew he couldn't confront it directly. He needed a distraction. Spotting an empty metal canister near his foot, he picked it up, calculating the best angle. With a swift toss, he sent it clattering down an adjacent hallway. The alien's head snapped toward the sound, and it immediately moved to investigate. Taking advantage of the diversion, Marcus slipped out of the room and into the open air, his heart pounding as he made a beeline for the tree line. He didn't stop until he was deep within the forest, the heavy cover of trees surrounding him once more. Back at the cabin, Lyra was waiting, her expression a mixture of worry and relief as she saw him return. He quickly set the materials down, showing her the crystal he had found. "It's not exactly like you described, but it's all I could find," he said, handing it to her. Lyra's eyes lit up as she examined it, her fingers brushing over the crystalline surface. "It's perfect," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "You've done it, Marcus. This will be enough." Without wasting a moment, they set to work on her damaged craft. Marcus followed her instructions, carefully installing the makeshift conduits and placing the crystal within the core housing. Lyra's hands moved deftly, though her energy was fading quickly. "We're almost ready," she said, her voice trained. "Once the core stabilizes, we'll have a small window to activate the jump, but we must be quick. They won't stop searching." Marcus nodded, mentally preparing for the journey ahead. As he tightened the last screw and secured the final panel, he felt a strange calm settle over him. Despite the danger, the exhaustion, and the uncertainty, he was exactly where he needed to be, standing beside Lyra, ready to face whatever awaited them. Finally, the ship powered up with a soft hum, its interior lights glowing a steady green. Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and gratitude. "We have a chance now," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Let's get them to safety." With one last glance at the cabin, the life he was leaving behind, Marcus climbed aboard, a newfound resolve in his heart. Together, they prepared to leave Earth behind, venturing into the unknown to protect the lives of Lyra and her unborn children. With the ship humming steadily beneath them, Marcus settled into the co-pilot's seat as Lyra activated the controls, her fingers moving swiftly over the holographic interface. Outside, the forest receded, the dawn light filtering through the cabin windows as they ascended. Marcus glanced down, feeling a pang of bittersweet nostalgia as the trees and hills of Cedar Ridge grew smaller below. He was leaving behind everything he had known, but the purpose filling his heart outweighed any regret. "We're approaching the portal point," Lyra said, her voice calm but laced with urgency. "The journey will be brief, but intense. Hold on tightly." Marcus gripped the edge of his seat as a low hum vibrated through the craft, rising in intensity. Through the window, he could see a point in the sky shimmering faintly, like a ripple in water. As they drew closer, the shimmer expanded, forming an iridescent circle that pulsed with a strange, otherworldly energy. The ship shuddered as they entered the portal, and Marcus felt a pressure in his chest, a sense of being pulled in multiple directions at once. Colors and shapes twisted outside the windows, stretching and warping in impossible patterns. He clenched his teeth, resisting the instinct to shut his eyes. After what felt like an eternity, the turbulence ceased. The view outside returned to normal, except now, they were somewhere else entirely. A vast, star-strewn expanse stretched before them, planets and moons in unfamiliar orbits, shimmering with hues that defied earthly understanding. "Welcome to my world," Lyra murmured, her voice filled with a quiet reverence. But as night fell over the veil, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that their respite would be short-lived. The veil was a sanctuary, yes, but he knew that Lyra's enemies would never stop searching, never give up the chase, and he was prepared to face whatever lay ahead, for her and for the innocent lives she carried. As he settled into the quiet of the alien night, surrounded by the gentle glow of the veil's mystical flora, Marcus felt a strange peace settle over him. He knew the journey was far from over, but he was ready for whatever came next. The stillness of the silent veil embraced them, offering a rare sense of calm and safety. Marcus and Lyra spent the following days quietly recovering in their secluded clearing, the serenity of the veil a welcome balm after the relentless pursuit. Yet Marcus knew this peace was temporary. They needed a long-term plan, a permanent refuge where Lyra's children could grow up free from the faction's grasp. One morning, as Marcus walked along the edge of the veil, he stumbled upon something unexpected, a large ancient structure hidden among the trees. Carved from stone, it looked like a sanctuary or shrine, its surface marked with symbols similar to those on Lyra's ship. Intrigued, he ran his fingers over the markings, feeling an inexplicable warmth. He knew he needed to show Lyra. When he returned to the clearing, Lyra's eyes lit up as he described the discovery. "The Shrine of Ancients," she whispered, her gaze thoughtful. "I heard stories of such places. They're said to be conduits of the veil's energy. If the stories are true, the shrine could help us amplify the veil's protection, making it harder for them to track us." Marcus felt a surge of hope. This could be the answer they needed, a chance to strengthen their defenses. "Let's go," he said, determination brightening his gaze. "If there's a way to secure our safety, we have to try." Lyra nodded, and together they made their way through the forest, guided by the gentle glow of the veil's plants. The path to the shrine was narrow and overgrown, as though it hadn't been used in centuries. The deeper they ventured, the more they sensed the pulsing energy of the veil, an ancient power radiating from the land itself. As they approached the shrine, Lyra's expression grew reverent. She placed a hand on the structure, her touch light and respectful. "The ancients once lived in harmony with the veil," she murmured. "They believed its energy was a gift, one that should be protected and nurtured." Marcus watched as she traced the symbols, a sense of awe filling him. Even though he was far from Earth, he could feel a connection to this place, a feeling that reminded him of his earlier years, when he first fell in love with the mysteries of science and exploration. Lyra's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "If I can align my energy with the shrines, it should strengthen the veil's protection around us," she explained. "But I'll need your help to stabilize it." Without hesitation, Marcus stepped forward. They linked hands, and he felt the familiar warmth of their connection, a comforting sensation that filled him with strength. Together, they closed their eyes, focusing on the energy surrounding them, letting it flow between them and into the shrine. Slowly, the air around them began to hum, and a soft light enveloped the shrine, casting their surroundings in a gentle, ethereal glow. The ground beneath them vibrated faintly as the veil's energy intensified, spreading outward like a protective shield. Marcus could feel the power growing, an invisible barrier solidifying around their small haven. But as the energy pulsed, something unexpected happened. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the veil, as if the land itself were speaking. "Seekers of peace, why do you come?" it asked, each word reverberating in their chests. Marcus and Lyra exchanged a startled glance, both unsure of what to say. Finally, Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "We seek sanctuary," she answered, her tone respectful. "We are hunted, and my children's lives are at risk. We mean no harm. We only wish to live in peace." A moment of silence stretched on, heavy and profound. Then the voice spoke again, softer this time, almost compassionate. "If your intentions are pure, the veil will protect you. But know this, peace must be balanced with strength. If you are to remain here, you must be prepared to face the darkness that follows you." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The words were a reminder that no matter how powerful the veil's protection, it wouldn't shield them from every danger. He and Lyra would need to be vigilant, to defend this sanctuary with all they had. "We understand," Marcus said, his voice resolute. "We're prepared to protect each other and this place." Lyra's eyes widened as she looked toward the shrine. "It's reacting to us," she whispered, a spark of hope in her voice. Marcus felt a surge of strength, a renewed sense of purpose. "Maybe it doesn't have to be your life force, Lyra. Maybe it can be ours, combined." Without hesitation, they'd reached out to the shrine, placing their hands on its cool, ancient stone. Together, they focused on the energy of the veil, letting their shared strength and determination flow into the shrine. The air around them crackled with power as the veil responded, the protective energy surging and expanding, forming an impenetrable barrier around them. The hunters, sensing the shift, howled in frustration, their bodies flickering as the veil's energy destabilized their forms. One by one, they faltered, their figures blurring and dissipating into the shadows until only silence remained. Marcus and Lyra slumped against the shrine, their breaths ragged but filled with relief. They had won for now. As the days passed, Marcus and Lyra began to settle into their new life in the veil. The threat of the hunters had subsided, but the experience left a lasting impact. Together, they continued to strengthen the veil's energy, each day bringing a renewed sense of hope and security. Marcus became adept at harnessing the veil's resources, creating a sustainable sanctuary where they could raise Lyra's children. When the time came for Lyra to give birth, Marcus was by her side, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and awe. The triplets arrived one by one, each baby glowing faintly with the energy of the veil, their soft cries filling the quiet sanctuary. Lyra held them close, her face radiant with joy, and Marcus felt a deep, overwhelming love for the tiny, fragile lives they had fought so hard to protect. "They're beautiful," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Lyra smiled, her gaze soft as she looked up at him. "They're alive because of you, Marcus. You gave them a chance." He shook his head, a humble smile tugging at his lips. "We did this together." In the days that followed, Marcus took on the role of a protector, a guardian, and, unexpectedly, a father figure to the children. Each child had a unique presence, their personalities unfolding as they grew. The eldest was quiet and observant, with a curiosity that reminded Marcus of his own fascination with discovery. The second was gentle and compassionate, with a calming energy that brought peace to everyone around. And the youngest, a bright-eyed, spirited child, had a spark of courage that mirrored his mother's. As the years passed, Marcus taught the children about the Veil, the energy that protected them, and the world beyond its borders. They grew up surrounded by love, curiosity, and the wonder of their sanctuary. Though the Veil shielded them from outside threats, Marcus ensured they understood the importance of protecting and nurturing the power within. One evening, as the children played by the edge of the Veil, Marcus and Lyra stood together, watching them with pride. The glow of the Veil bathed their sanctuary in a warm, protective light, and Marcus felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "They're strong," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "They'll do great things one day." Lyra nodded, her expression wistful. "They have the heart and courage of their father." Marcus smiled, his gaze soft as he looked at her. "And the spirit of their mother." They shared a quiet, contented silence, knowing that they had built something beautiful and enduring. The Veil had given them sanctuary, a place to grow and thrive, and they had honored its gift with their love and resilience. In the depths of the silent Veil, far from the eyes of those who would seek to harm them, Marcus, Lyra, and the children found a future filled with hope, peace, and the quiet strength that bound them together. And in that sanctuary, their story lived on, a testament to the unbreakable bond between two worlds, united by love and the courage to protect it. The light around the shrine dimmed, and the hum of energy faded. They stood in silence, the profoundness of the moment settling over them. The shrine had offered them its protection, but it was a reminder of the dangers still lurking in the shadows. As they made their way back to the clearing, Marcus noticed a new resolve in Lyra's eyes. She seemed more at peace, yet a fierce determination burned within her, an inner strength born from her love for her unborn children. "We'll make this work," Marcus said softly, sensing her worries. "We'll protect them." Lyra nodded, her expression one of gratitude and hope. "With you here, I believe it's possible," she replied, her voice warm. For the next few days, they continued to fortify their small sanctuary. Using parts from Lyra's ship and whatever resources the Veil provided, Marcus set up basic defenses around the clearing. They worked side by side, drawing strength from each other's presence, each small task strengthening their bond and their determination to survive. Just as they began to feel a sense of security settling over them, a faint hum disturbed the quiet evening air. Marcus froze, his heart sinking as he recognized the familiar sound. He turned, his eyes scanning the edge of the Veil, where shadows moved beneath the trees. "They're here," he whispered, his voice tense. Lyra's face tightened with fear, her hand instinctively moving to her abdomen. "I thought the shrine's protection would keep them out," she murmured, a note of desperation in her voice. "It has, but they're probing the edges," Marcus replied, his gaze hardening. "Testing for weaknesses. We'll need to hold them off." With a deep breath, he moved to the edge of the clearing, where he had set up a series of makeshift barriers. Lyra joined him, her expression fierce despite the fear in her eyes. Together, they stood at the edge of their sanctuary, watching as shadowed figures emerged from the trees. The alien hunters were taller and more intimidating than any they'd encountered before, their forms sleek and imposing, weapons glowing ominously in the dim light. But Marcus felt a surge of defiance rise within him. He had come too far to back down now. "Stay close," he told Lyra, positioning himself between her and the intruders. The lead hunter raised a clawed hand, a low, guttural growl escaping its throat as it advanced, its dark eyes fixed on Lyra. But as it stepped closer, the energy of the veil flared to life, repelling it with a sharp, crackling sound. The creature hissed, frustrated, its gaze shifting to Marcus with newfound aggression. Marcus tightened his grip on his makeshift weapon, his stance firm. "You're not taking them," he said, his voice unwavering. A tense standoff ensued, the hunters pacing just beyond the veil's energy field, their movements predatory and calculating. Marcus and Lyra braced themselves, knowing that the creatures would try to find a way in. But as long as they stood together, the hunters would meet fierce resistance. The veil's energy pulsed around them, and for a moment, Marcus felt the strength of the shrine within him, a silent promise of protection. The battle wasn't over, but he knew they had something the hunters didn't: courage, resilience, and the bond of a shared purpose. And he was prepared to defend it to his last breath. The silent standoff stretched on, tension filling the air as Marcus and Lyra faced down the alien hunters prowling at the edge of the veil's energy field. The creatures paced back and forth, their dark eyes gleaming with menace and determination. Despite the veil's protective energy, Marcus knew that it was only a matter of time before the hunters found a weakness in the barrier. He turned to Lyra, whose face was a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. "We need to find a way to strengthen the veil's energy," he whispered, his gaze flicking back to the hunters. Lyra nodded, her hand resting protectively over her abdomen. "There's one last thing we could try," she replied, "but it will require more energy than I have left." Marcus's heart sank as he read the determination in her eyes. There has to be another way. Lyra shook her head, her expression calm but resolute. "If I channel my life force into the veil, it will create a barrier strong enough to protect us." But her voice faltered, and Marcus understood the implication instantly. "No," he said firmly, taking her hand. "There's no way I'm letting you sacrifice yourself. We'll find another way." As they held each other's gaze, a new sound filled the air, a deep, resonant hum that Marcus recognized immediately. The shrine was responding to their presence, as though it sensed their desperation and shared their determination to survive. The ancient energy pulsed, radiating outward and enveloping the clearing in a protective glow.